Get possessed by SEGA this Halloween. Ooh, spooky. Here's 5 reasons. The SEGA of today is a mere shell of their former selves, but this Halloween we're going to try to resurrect them. It's alive! It's alive! SEGA's alive! Well, okay, maybe not quite. At least not as a console manufacturer, which is what we're focusing on. I'm Rod the Retro Gaming Puppet, and this is a 5 Reasons Halloween special. So, yeah, we're going to do things a little differently this year. What we're doing is we're going to go ahead and look at one game on each of the 4 home consoles that SEGA released in the United States, and one game on one of their add-ons just to round out the list. We're going to go chronologically, starting with the SEGA Master System and ending with the SEGA Dreamcast. Now, I should reiterate that on this show we only talk about games that are exclusive to their particular consoles, so it's going to be one game each for each of these systems, and they are still exclusive to the platform. So hey, let's get started. Without further ado, here's 5 spooky reasons to own SEGA hardware. Basketball Nightmare is one of those games that just never hits its potential. A game that features all kinds of monsters playing basketball should be awesome, but sadly it's extremely basic. Especially when you consider it was developed by SEGA themselves at a time when they were firing on all cylinders, but sadly, no, it just never gets there. It's impressive that they did a full 5-on-5 basketball game for the Master System, but it's so slow and the mechanics are so basic, it would have been better to just go for a 2-on-2 setup like Arch Rivals or Neketsu Street Basket. Add to that, you can't even play as the monsters, even in a 2-player mode, and it's just a letdown. All that differentiates the characters are the sweet dunk animations, and when all's said and done, that's about all the game has to offer. But, just to be clear, these dunk animations are sweet. As with many late-era Master System games, this one was released in Europe only, but it's not that expensive and the international shipping isn't too bad, so it's worth getting your hands on if this is the kind of thing that's up your alley. Ultimately, this is the kind of thing that I'd love to see SEGA bring back now as a downloadable title. Make the monsters playable, give them all different special abilities. It could be a blast. Oh, and get rid of those Campbell's Soup kids they force you to play as in this version. When I did 5 reasons to own a SEGA Genesis, people asked why this game wasn't included. Well, because I wanted to save it for Halloween, of course. As with Contra Hard Corps, this game has never gotten any kind of re-release, which is a tragedy because it's honestly one of the most underrated entries in the series. This game sees the player take on the role of either John Morris or Eric Lacard and traverse early 20th century Europe to stop Dracula from being resurrected by Countess Elizabeth Bartley, no doubt inspired by the real 16th century Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory. This structure opens up the level design a lot and lets the designers have fun with this stuff, since you're not restricted to just Dracula's castle. Both characters play differently, with Eric being able to vault using his spear and John being able to swing from the ceilings with the vampire killer. This can lead to branching paths within the levels that only one character can go down. The play is smooth, the soundtrack is great, among the best on the system, and you can jump on and off the stairs, unlike many other Castlevania games. This is almost certainly the most well-known game on this list, but hey, if you haven't played it, make it a priority to check out. The SEGA CD was home to a wide swath of bad full-motion video games, and many of them were ported to other systems. Drek like Night Trap and Double Switch hit home computers and other consoles, but Ground Zero Texas, easily among the best games from the Schlockmeisters at Digital Pictures? SEGA CD only, and even then, only in the US and Europe. Ground Zero Texas is an invasion of the body snatchers type of horror tale. You've been called into a small Texas border town to eliminate an alien threat that has begun taking the form of local townspeople. The game is a light gun shooter, except, well, there's no light gun support. There are other segments to break things up a bit, but the main action is shooting, and controlling the crosshair with a controller is far from perfect. Also, fun fact, the game was directed by Hollywood director Dwight Little, who directed such films as Halloween 4, Tekken, and Rapid Fire starring Brandon Lee. Ultimately, it's a shame that this game never came out on a system that could better process the video or incorporate light gun support. Those two things would have made this game a campy good time. As it stands, it's still a decent addition if you're a Sega CD aficionado, and as with many games on the platform, it's cheap. After Resident Evil came out, a lot of folks tried their hands at survival horror, including Sega's AM7 team, the folks behind Phantasy Star 4, Streets of Rage 3, and Skies of Arcadia, among others. This game is, along with the original Silent Hill, one of the more successful attempts to make a Resident Evil clone. The game has you playing as John Mayer? Seriously? Well, no, not that John Mayer. But anyways, you're part of a security and rescue team at an underwater research facility. An alien object has crashed into the ocean nearby and, well, yeah, it's basically like The Thing meets The Abyss. The game actually improves on some aspects of Resident Evil, making ammo a lot more available and allowing you to move and shoot at the same time. Additionally, you don't seem to have limited inventory space. It does use tank controls, but apparently not if you use the Saturn 3D controller. I don't have one, so I couldn't confirm that personally. Finally, the puzzles are almost exclusively around getting things working in and around the facility, not crests or keys with card suits on them. The game still has some shortcomings, and I wouldn't put it on the level of Resident Evil 2 or Code Veronica, but like I said, definitely one of the more competent Resident Evil clones out there. Deep Fear is a great hidden gem if you're either a Saturn fan or a survival horror fan, and definitely if you're both. The game was only released in Japan and the UK, and the UK version was the final European release for the Sega Saturn, which means, yeah, it's incredibly rare and it's got a price tag to match. Fortunately, the Japanese version is all in English as far as the dialogue is concerned, and many of the menus are as well, so it's super import friendly and it's cheap. So hey, check it out. The late Kenji Eno, and before you correct me, it is Eno, not Eno. It's not a Japanese name, it's a pseudonym. He took it for himself after the legendary musician and record producer Brian Eno. The late Kenji Eno was known for making strange games. D2 is arguably the most normal, but it's still odd to say the least. The player takes on the role of Laura, a digital actress who had starred in two of Eno's previous games. After a plane crash, Laura is stranded on a Canadian mountain with creatures who at first appear human, but mutate into bizarre monsters. Frozen wasteland setting. Creatures that appear human at first. I wonder where the inspiration for this came from. Oh, right. That movie sure has inspired a lot of video games, hasn't it? Anyways, Laura is left to figure out what's going on here and escape. The exploration sequences are similar to Resident Evil, but when you find monsters, it shifts to a first-person perspective for combat. You have infinite ammo in your main machine gun, which helps a lot. The indoor sequences move similarly to the original D. You just move on rails from point to point, so there's no pixel hunting for items hidden in shadow when you're investigating a cabin. The biggest problem I have with this game are the Metal Gear Solid length cutscenes. I mean, these cutscenes can go on, and honestly, it can get a little tiresome. Trying to describe D2 in such a short segment is nearly impossible, but I'll say this. If you've got a taste for the weird and a love for Sega's final console, you owe it to yourself to check this one out. And that'll do it. Thanks for joining me. I'm Roger the Retro Gaming Puppet, but stay tuned, because we've got one more Halloween show left. Joe will be back soon with an episode of Same Name, Different Game, celebrating the Halloween holiday. And we'll see you then.
Hey! Do you really have to watch the rest of this stupid movie to see how it's gonna end? Here, take control.
Those aliens are masters of disguise.
You've got the firepower, use it!
Not your typical video game, huh?
You call that shooting?
Better pay attention. Those aliens can look like anybody. Your brother, sister, anybody.
Hungry?
Ground Zero, Texas, only on Sega CD.
Look out!